Okay, this is the information session for Battlemarch Village in Woburn, the affordable units within this brand new condominium development. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. We're the affordable housing lottery agent that's been hired by the developer to help administer the lottery, to market this opportunity, to advise interested households about what this opportunity is, and to help facilitate the process all the way up until the lottery, and then after the lottery when households close on units. So the purpose of tonight will just be to go through some of the major, the sort of the biggest points about what this opportunity is and how to apply and what to expect. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to type them in the comment box to the right of where you see me. I'll just type something there now so you can see. So this session is for your benefit. If you have questions at any time, please let me know and I will address those. And then in the meantime, I'll just go through kind of what this opportunity is and what to expect going forward. I think this is going to be a lottery for 2 affordable condominium units at Battlemarch Village. These units are going to sell for a little under $300,000, which is substantially below what they would be on the market. Condo fees are a little over $200 a month, and those cover the costs of management, master insurance, landscaping, snow removal, common area water and electricity, and general maintenance around the condominium. Affordable in this context, in this program, doesn't mean subsidized, and so households will be expected to be able to obtain mortgage pre-approvals and then a mortgage commitment on the strength of their own income and assets. And you'll see in the affordable housing application that with your application, you do have to submit a mortgage pre-approval. And the reason for that is, there's no minimum income requirement to be included in this lottery, but we need to have some comfort that you do have enough that you can get a mortgage commitment if and when the time comes. That'll be later in the process. That won't necessarily be for everyone because there's only 2 units, and I expect there are going to be more households. There are already more households in the lottery than there are units. So some households will get an opportunity to move forward, and unfortunately some won't. But if you are one of the lucky ones to move forward, you will eventually need to get a mortgage commitment as part of the home buying process. I can tell you we've worked with Seaver Construction on another development in Woburn, and my understanding is they build really beautiful stuff. There was a lot of interest when we did that lottery. I think people were quite satisfied with the homes. I have no reason to expect anything different here. You can look on their website. They have a very nice website. You can find just typing in Battlemarch Village into Google, and you can see photos and a lot of information about the development. And I can just tell you a little bit that all the affordable units have 2 beds and 2 bathrooms, plus 2 off-street parking spaces, highly efficient HVAC systems, gas-fired forced hot air systems, central AC, hybrid electric water heaters, granite countertops in the kitchen, so very high-end. Stainless steel appliances, again, very high-end, and 36-inch upper cabinets, also quite nice. You can store all the things you need to in your cabinets. My understanding is that the development is close to a lot of local shops and restaurants and outdoor spaces, so conveniently located to a lot of area attractions. probably the most important thing I can say is if you think you're interested after this information session and or after looking through the information packet, just get your application in. This is a no documentation lottery, which means that you have to fill out the application, but a lot of the supporting documentation that could be required later if you move forward, it's not required right now. And the supporting documentation is what takes most people the longest. So, getting tax 1040s for the past 3 years and getting all your bank statements and your pay stubs and 1099s and W-2s and all of those things. That process can take some time, but that's not applicable just yet. You do need to fill out the application and get your mortgage pre-approval, but I think most households find that filling out the application without all that supporting documentation is obviously quite a bit easier. So if you think you're interested, if you think you meet the income and asset limits, go ahead and submit an application to get into the lottery. So let's just talk a little bit about kind of the steps and what this is going to look like. I think the best way to think about this process is probably as a 3-step process. The first step is going to be submitting an application with SEB Housing. That's us. Again, we're an off-site affordable housing compliance consultant hired by the development team, so we don't work on site. And we exist to make sure that applicants are informed about the process, know what the requirements are, and to make sure that people qualify and only qualified households, that only qualified households get to move forward in this process. So step 1 is submitting an application. If you're eligible, that you'd move on to step 2, which is the actual lottery. And then from the lottery, we'll generate waiting lists. And from those waiting lists, certain households will get to move forward in the home buying process. And that will be with the developer's sales team. SEB Housing will be sort of peripherally involved, making sure some of the affordable housing documentation requirements are met. But the main sort of meat and potatoes of buying the home, so reserving a unit, looking at the units, signing a purchase and sale agreement, getting a mortgage commitment, and eventually closing, those are things that you'd be coordinating with the developer and their sales team. So let's start with step 1, which is the step that primarily the people involved in step 1 are going to be you and us, SEB Housing. What are the eligibility requirements for this opportunity? So everyone in the household must qualify as a first-time home buyer. Talk about that in some more detail in a second. The entire household's income and assets must be within the parameters defined by the program. Households have to be pre-approved for a mortgage, and households or their family members can't have a financial interest in the development. I won't circle back on that one because, frankly, it's not something that comes up very often. If you're related to Seaver Construction or people who work for that company or their sales team, that could disqualify you because it could create would disqualify you because it can create the appearance of impropriety. But that's not something that comes up often. And as long as, you're not related to someone on the sales team or the development team and you don't have some financial interest in this development, then you wouldn't be disqualified on that basis. Well, let's talk about kind of the biggest, let's talk first about the requirement relative to income and assets. Okay, so it probably comes as no surprise as these units are pretty steeply discounted, less than $300,000 from what they would be on the market. May come as no surprise that you have to meet certain income and asset requirements, be below certain limits. If you make more than those, then per the program, you'd be someone who makes too much for this opportunity. Income limits are based on the number of persons in your household. So depending on how many people are going to be in your household will change what the income limit is that applies to you. You don't have to memorize the numbers I'm about to say because they're littered throughout the information packet, the application, and the ad. They're on our website. There are myriad places you can find them. But just to go kind of quickly here, the household size of 1 can make up to $67,400. A household size of 2 can make up to $77,000. A household size of 3 can make up to $86,650. And a household size of 4 can make up to $96,250. Now, if you're wondering where those income limits come from, those are figures that are published by HUD in April, usually April of every year. So every year they change a little bit. Usually they go up a little bit. Some years they go down a little bit. Next year they might very well likely go down a little bit, but most years they go up a bit. And they're the numbers. HUD publishes different numbers for different geographic regions. There are a couple regions in Massachusetts, the biggest one being the Boston, Cambridge, and Quincy area. And Woburn is part of that area. That area has the highest income limits of any geographic area within Massachusetts. So if you were applying for a different development, same program, same exact program, different development in a different geographic area, you would see those income limits are different and they'd be less. Income limit is everyone in the household. So it includes everyone in the house who would be moving into the unit with you, with the exception of minors, so under the age of 18, and full-time students who are dependents. So, you know, if you have a child who would be moving into the unit with you, who is a full-time student, and they make, you know, $5,000 a year in income from a job they have, then only $480 of that would count. The other 4,000 plus, we don't count it. I should also say one note about minors is the income that we don't count. Okay, the income we don't count is income from jobs. So if you have a 15-year-old kid that has a side job, you know, has a job, and they make, you know, $8,000 a year, we don't count that. Okay, we don't count any of that. But if you have a 15-year-old kid who has the same amount of income, but it's from a trust or something, so it's not job-related income, it's a different source, then that probably would count. Income is gross income. It's not your net income. It's not after-tax income. It's your gross income. And like I said, with those two exceptions that I mentioned, it's everyone in the household. Income is defined broadly in this program. And just so you know, SEB housing will be required, especially for households who may get the opportunity to move forward after the lottery. We would be required to take a thorough look at your income. And by thorough look, I mean looking at the supporting documentation. So looking at pay stubs and your tax returns, bank accounts, etc. But we do that because that's what the program requires. We're not sort of inventing, sources of income or looking at anything that we don't need to be looking at. Just to give you, the application gives you some sense of what the various income sources could be. Oftentimes people, when they think of income, they just think of, money that they may think of the income that they get from their primary job, and that certainly is income, but there can be other sources of income as well. So if you're self-employed, you have a second side job, that would count as income. If you're self-employed, maybe if you're divorced, you get child support or alimony, that counts as income. If you get Social Security income or SSDI, again, those are additional sources of income. If you're drawing down money from some kind of retirement asset, right? Every 2 weeks, you take some, $500 out, recurring, that would be income. If you're receiving unemployment compensation or workman's compensation, that counts as income. Another one that comes up sometimes is periodic payments from friends or family. So maybe a household gets $300 every 2 weeks from a family member to help with groceries and other life essentials. That's great, That's wonderful if you have that, but we are required to count that as income. Now that one is a little bit, it depends somewhat on the frequency of it. If it's $300, 3 or 4 times a year, probably not. But if it's every week or every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, and there's a pattern that's been going on for a while, then yeah, we probably would need to count that as income. Also, sometimes assets generate income. Even like a savings account doesn't generate much income, but it generates a little bit of income that would get counted towards your income total. And in general, not that you necessarily need to worry about this, but income in this program is sort of projection of what the household is likely to make in the next 12 months, using as data what you've been making, because what you've been making is often a very good indicator of what you may make going forward. It's not perfect by its very definition. It can't be perfect. Things change. You're trying to predict the future, but recent past income is oftentimes a good predictor, probably the best predictor that's available of future income. If you are someone who says, look, I made this amount, this year, but here is evidence that shows that it's going to be less in the upcoming year, we can consider that. But a statement that doesn't, that I'm going to make less in the next year without any confirming evidence is probably not something that we can consider, because then anyone could say, well, yeah, I made 80,000 this year, but I'm going to make 60,000 next year, so I'm eligible. Well, we need to see some proof that supports that statement. Okay, so that's a primer on income. You don't need to be an expert on it, but I guess what you should do is when you fill out the application, there's a table with various sources of income. Please go through that carefully and really think about all the different sources of income that you may have, because it would be a shame if you forgot about something that really is an income source, and then you put down a number. We say, great, you're eligible, and then later you get to move forward and we're doing a more thorough review, and we come across this other source of income you forgot to list, and oops, sorry, that bumps you over the income limit, and now that stinks because you got your hopes up and you think you're moving forward, and we are in the unfortunate position of telling you, yeah, but you didn't disclose this income source, and that puts you over the limit. So take time with that table, really think about it. Please don't find yourself in that position of failing to disclose income that could put you over the income limit and disqualify you later in time. Okay. Also, like income, there's an asset limit. Households cannot have more than $75,000 in assets. Assets like income are are defined fairly broadly in this program. There's various different types of assets that people have, which is everything from your checking and savings account to maybe you have a retirement account, maybe you have a trust account, maybe you have stocks and bonds. If you are getting down payment assistance, actually, that's one that kind of comes up with some frequency. So, hey, I have a friend or family member who's going to gift me $2,000 towards this home purchase. That's great. That's terrific. If you have that, that's an asset. Okay, that $2,000 will get included toward your asset total. So factor that in if that is something that applies to you. Also, if you own a home, okay, obviously that's an asset. That's most people's biggest asset. And the equity that you have in the home would get counted towards your asset total. I should say as well that you can't own a home and move forward in this. Let me say that again. You can't buy a home at Battlemarch Village if you own a home. Now, most people, I guess most people aren't sort of trying to own 2 homes at once. You can apply if you still own a home, but you would need to sell that home, or at least have it under P&S at the time you're going to move forward after the lottery. And in a second, I'm going to talk about the home ownership restriction. So stay tuned for that. But you can't. The general rule is you cannot still own a home and be buying a home at Battlemarch Village. You would need to dispose of the home first, and it would need to be under a purchase and sale agreement at the time you were moving forward in the home buying process at Battlemarch. So, i.e., you can't reserve a unit at Battlemarch if your current home is not under P&S. I said that assets are defined pretty expansively, and they are, but they don't count personal assets. So we're not interested in the value of your, rare, guitar collection or artwork or your car or jewelry or any of those things. Okay, so those things we are not looking into, asking about, counting. Sometimes households will ask, well, what if I'm under the income limit, but I'm over the asset limit? Can we sort of even them out if I'm, pretty well under the income limit, but a little over the asset limit, or vice versa? And the answer is no. You got to be under both. Okay, you got to meet both the income limitation and the asset limitation. Okay, so a moment ago I just talked about home ownership. That was also something I talked about towards the beginning and the sort of main criteria for eligibility for this opportunity. Everyone in the household must qualify as a first-time home buyer, which means that you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years. But there are exceptions to that rule. If someone in your household owns a home and is over the age of 55, they're exempted from that rule. They still have to sell the home, but the fact that they own it now, i.e. in the past 3 years, wouldn't disqualify them. Okay, but if you're 45 and you own a home, you can't, and you don't meet any of the other exceptions, which I'll talk about in a sec. Just selling the current home that you have and trying to move to Battlemarch won't work. You don't meet one of the exceptions. The other two that come up the most often are displaced homemakers and single parents. Those are folks who usually were in a marriage, owned a home through the marriage, and for displaced homemaker, worked primarily in the home up, and for the family upkeeping the home without, getting paid. But again, they still can't own the home and move forward. So, this could be someone, maybe they're not over 55, that's okay. But if they worked in the home, they would just need to be off the deed by getting a quitclaim deed, or because the marriage has been, the divorce has been, finalized and they are not taking ownership of the home. A single parent, similar, if there's any single parents who owned a home with their spouse but now are divorcing, they would meet one of the exceptions, but they can't own the home any longer. So that would have to be because, either again they quitclaim deeded it to the other spouse, or not taking the home through the divorce, which is finalized. Okay. And I should say, if there are any households who are in a marriage but are contemplating divorce, the divorce separation doesn't have to be finalized when you apply, but it does have to be started. So if it's just, something you're thinking about but haven't acted upon, then we would need to count the spouse's income and assets. They need to be included in the application, which probably isn't, what you want if you're contemplating a divorce and moving to a new residence. So in order not to count the spouse, the divorce process would need to have started. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the household types and how the lottery is going to work out. Actually, before I do that, I want to just skip to mortgage pre-approval standards, and then I'll get back to that. So with your application, you do have to submit a mortgage pre-approval, and again, that's to show that you are likely to be a viable buyer in this process. There is a page on the mortgage pre-approval standards in our information packet, which you can find on our website, or hopefully you have one already. It's page 10. I would strongly recommend that you make a copy of this page, or you can even, if you have an extra copy already, you can just tear it right out of the information packet. When you go to apply for a mortgage pre-approval, bring this page and show it to the bank, because they're going to find out about the different requirements and restrictions related to this home, and also the standards that apply to any mortgage product that they may offer. It's best that you be upfront with them, and it's best that they have all this information as early on as possible, because what you don't want to have happen is have a bank not be aware of some of the affordable housing requirements or restrictions, pre-approve you get excited, a couple months down the road, maybe you're one of the households lucky enough to move forward after the lottery, and when you go to get your mortgage commitment, the bank says, oops, didn't realize this requirement, we can't meet that, and now you have a problem. So best that you bring this page with you so they know exactly what some of those requirements are, and if so they go in, eyes wide open. We do list at least one lender that we've, I think we've worked with before and who knows the program. We also list a website where you can find out about different banks and mortgage brokers who are familiar with the affordable program. And they list banks and mortgage lenders all over the state. You are certainly free to choose any bank or mortgage provider of your choosing. That's totally up to you. But going through a bank who is familiar with this program and who perhaps has made loans through this program could be beneficial to you, because they know what the requirements are. They know if they can meet them. They know how it works. And there's value in having that, so that you have kind of the best, you have some reassurance that if you move forward, you have a bank that's going to be able to deliver, that's not going to have some, issue crop up later in the process that's going to derail it. One of the things I should mention is these homes all will be restricted through a deed rider. And the deed rider, it does a number of things, but probably the principal thing it does is restrict how much you can resell the home for. And for some banks, that can be an issue, but for banks familiar with this program and who lend through this program, it shouldn't be, or it won't be. And so we also have an example deed rider on our website. You can print that out, and along with the page in the information packet, you can bring them that sample deed rider so they can see what's in there, and again can make sure that there's not anything in there that they're going to find objectionable or problematic. For your purposes, and again, this is sort of jumping way down the road, sort of jumping ahead in time, but that deed rider that I mentioned, I don't think many people come into this opportunity thinking that they're going to get to buy an affordable home and flip it in a year and make some grand profit. But if that's your thought, let me disabuse you of that now, because that's not how this program works. The deed rider restricts how much you can resell the home for and ensures that the home stays affordable in perpetuity. We give an example towards the end of the information packet you can look at just to get a sense of kind of how much. It's hard to say exactly how much you could resell it for, because it depends on numbers that get published each year. I would say towards the high end, I recently saw a home that over the course of 4 years, I think the resale value went up $40,000, but I was pretty surprised by that. I don't know that that's something that I wouldn't necessarily anticipate or expect that. this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for home ownership at an affordable price. I would generally say I wouldn't go into it thinking of it as an investment opportunity, because that deed rider does really restrict the resale price. And if you're curious generally about how that works, take a look at pages 20 and 21 of the information packet. We give some of the details about what's in the deed rider and some examples of how a resale would be limited by the deed rider. Okay, let's talk a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about mortgage pre-approval. We've talked about income. We've talked about assets, filling out your application. I want to stop there for a minute and say, when you fill out your application, on one of the first pages, it's going to ask you what type of household you are, type 2 or type 1. I don't need to spend much time on it because there are check boxes for both, and you can just check the one that applies to you. It's pretty self-explanatory. But what that means is a type 2 household is a household who generally needs 2 bedrooms per the program, and a type 1 household is a household who generally only needs 1 bedroom per the program. Okay, you may disagree with the program, but that's what the program says. So just by way of example only, the program would say any 4-person household, so if you have 2 parents and 2 kids, they're going to say they need 2 bedrooms at minimum. Maybe they need more, but they need 2 bedrooms. Okay, but on the other side, for a 1-person household, the program would say, look, unless they have a disability and need a 2nd bedroom to accommodate that, a 1-person household generally only needs 1 bedroom. They might like 2 bedrooms, but they don't actually need 2 bedrooms. And the importance of household type, we will discuss momentarily when we talk about the lottery and how we sort the waiting lists, which determine kind of where you are and if you're going to get a chance to move forward. But suffice to say that type 2 households will get priority over type 1 households for units at Battlemarch, because for the program, they need 2 bedrooms, whereas a type 1 household would be overhoused in a 2-bedroom unit, and the program doesn't want any overhoused households in a unit if they can get an appropriately sized household who needs all the bedrooms in that unit. Okay. There is also a question about whether you qualify for local preference. This is another priority category that will be implemented in the lottery, which again will impact where you end up on the waiting list for one of the units. A local preference household is a household who lives in Woburn, who works for Woburn, who works in Woburn, or who has kids attending the Woburn school system. There's a question on page 4 of the application. Please do not say that you qualify for local preference if you do not, because you will end up losing your waiting list position on the local preference list if you inaccurately claim local preference. And you may lose entirely your position. So please do not say that you qualify for local preference if you do not. The application will tell you about some of the documents that you would need to demonstrate that you do qualify for local preference. And it also outlines those 4 categories of what local preference are. Okay. So when you apply for the lottery, if you are eligible, you will get a letter from us that has your lottery application number and some other details. Please look at that letter carefully and make sure it's accurate. You will get a lottery number in the form of A. blank blank blank. It's going to be like A.001 or A.002, etc., etc. Those, please remember, those are just anonymous identifier numbers to be used in the lottery. They have no bearing on your position moving forward or anything like that. So A.001 did not necessarily win the lottery. They're not first. They were just the first household to complete a eligible application for this opportunity, and that's it. Okay, and that letter we send you is going to have some other information too, such as all the people you applied with, all the people you listed on your application, and what household type you are, whether you indicated you met local preference, and some other things as well. Make sure those are accurate, okay? Because some of those details are important, and you can't necessarily just switch information later on in time after the lottery, right? So, like for example, if you list here are the 4 people in my household, that's who we're qualifying. You can't necessarily just change that later on in time by adding household members or removing household members or swapping household members, okay? If you say that you're a type 2 household and in fact you're only a type 1 household, and we find that out later on, well, then that means you may have improperly given yourself a priority in the lottery that you didn't, that you weren't entitled to, and that may force you to lose your position. So anyway, point is, review the letter we send, make sure to, take a moment, make sure it's accurate. If there's anything that's not accurate, let us know, because you don't want to end up jeopardizing your lottery position because there was information that that you gave us that wasn't accurate. Okay, the lottery will be on December 7th at 6 p.m. It'll be exactly like we're doing right now. So it'll be via YouTube live stream and via conference call. When we do the lottery, there will be 2 drawings. There will be a local preference drawing and a general drawing. Every household who indicates that they qualify for local preference will be in the local preference drawing. We'll do that one first. I'll pick the numbers out of a box, show them up on the screen, and call them out as I do so. Once we do that, then we will switch over and do an open drawing. That'll be every household, including the local preference households. And again, same procedure. I'll pick the numbers out of the box, hold them up on the screen, and announce them as I call them. Now, the order that I pick the numbers out of the box has some relevance, and it is generally better or more, better for you to be picked earlier rather than later. However, the exact order does not necessarily reflect how the waiting lists are going to be composed, because there are other priorities that need to be factored in first. So that means that as I'm doing the actual lottery drawing, you're not going to be able to tell in real time exactly what it means. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a type 2 household and you get picked 4th. So you may say, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm number 4. And that's not necessarily true, because perhaps the 3 households who were picked before you were all type 1 households. And as I said earlier, type 2 households get priority over type 1 households. So you would actually skip all of those type 1 households. You'd be ahead of them on the waiting list. Conversely, if you're a type 1 household and you get picked first, and you say, great, I was picked first, I'm number 1. Well, not necessarily, because any household who's a type 2, even if they get drawn after you, is going to swap over you or hop over you on the waiting list. So none of this is just, sort of discourage households from tuning into the lottery, because, generally speaking, being picked earlier is better than being picked later. But it is just to say that in real time, you probably won't know exactly what it means, because there is some sorting that needs to be done. Now, the good news is I'll do that sorting immediately after the lottery, and I will send you the results if you have email that same night, or if you don't have email, I'll postal mail them to you. So you'll have the waiting list within, probably 2 hours of my running the lottery at 6 p.m. And those waiting lists will be ordered top to bottom in the order that households are going to get to move forward. There's only going to be 2 waiting lists, and they're both going to be for 2-bedroom units. One of them is going to be a local preference waiting list, and the other is going to be a general list. And the way it's going to work is that the first household on the local preference list is going to be the first household to move forward in the home buying process. If they end up buying a home, that list gets closed down. We move over to the general list. And then the first household on that list can select from the remaining unit. If they end up not buying it for whatever reason, we move on to the next household. If they don't buy it, we move on to the next household, and so on and so forth until that second unit is purchased. And then once the 2 units are purchased, that's kind of as far as it goes. So that is kind of it as far as the lottery. Once the lottery is run, like I said, I'll send you the waiting list so you'll know and where you stand and kind of what to expect going forward. Now, like you know already from watching this, and when you fill out your application, you don't have to submit all of the supporting documentation. But after the lottery, if you're one of the top households, you will. So, what I forgot to mention is when you get the eligibility notice with your application number for the lottery, we are going to send you a documents requirements guide. And that guide details all of the documents that will be necessary if you get called to move forward after the lottery. So if you are a planner or preparer, I would recommend, and I would recommend for everyone, start compiling some of those documents, because those documents, it's pretty extensive. It's a rigorous review. There's a lot that's required. And if you start building that file early on, right? So let's say you submit your application tomorrow, and next week you get a letter of eligibility from us. If you start compiling that documentation and building a nice organized folder, then if you get invited to move forward after the lottery, hopefully you have everything ready, and that becomes pretty simple. But if you haven't done anything up until that point, getting all the documentation together after the lottery, it's doable, but you're going to be probably rushing a little bit because you're only going to have about 7 days to do it. It's enough time, but it's not a lot of time. So I'd recommend that you, if you're serious about this opportunity, start putting your file together as soon as you get the documents requirements guide from us with your lottery application number, so that if you are called to move forward after the lottery, you're prepared to do so. We likely will invite a few more households than there are units to submit documentation after the lottery. And the reason we do that is because, in our experience, households may end up not buying a unit for one reason or another, and we want to have a list of households that are ready to go in the event the top household doesn't move forward. So there could be any number of reasons why a household doesn't move forward, but sometimes households aren't actually eligible. They tell us when they apply they make $65,000, but they totally forgot another source of income that they have, and in fact they make $80,000 and they're not eligible. So now we got to move on to the second household on the list. But if we haven't even started working with the second household on the list, now we may have lost 10 days working with the first household, and now we're kind of starting the process over. So we'll let you know where you stand, but don't be surprised. If you're number 2 or 3 or perhaps even 4 or 5 on the local preference waiting list, we may include you in an invite to submit documentation demonstrating your eligibility after the lottery, because we want to make sure we have households who are approved and ready to go if the top households don't work out for one reason or another. Top households. But let's just say you do submit you're in one of those top positions, you submit all the documentation to SEB. We then need to send you to a monitoring agent for a final certification to confirm that our analysis is correct. And assuming they agree, and they usually do, you'd move on to the next step. Now, in the next step, there are some additional players that get introduced. in the process. Up until this point, you've kind of been interacting primarily, if not exclusively, with SEB Housing. But when you are fully approved by us after the lottery, if you have one of those top spots that are going to be moving forward in the home buying process, you'll start interacting with people on the sales team. We're not the sales team. Now, we'll put you in touch with them, and we'll be sending, emails and correspondences so everyone knows who everyone is. At that point, we'd recommend that you get an attorney if you haven't already. And at that point, you'd be interacting, so you'd be first reserving the unit of your choice. There are only 2 units here, so you're going to pick the one that you, if you're number 1 on the local list, you're going to pick your first choice. By the way, the units are, I think, quite similar in design, although won't be ready at exactly the same time. I don't know exactly what the current delivery dates are, but that's something that you can work out with the sales team for the developer. They can give you all the details to show you pictures, floor plans. You may even be able to go see the units in person, timelines for delivery, and you can choose the unit that works best for you. So you would reserve the unit with them. Again, there's going to be a timeline for doing so. They want to move this along. They want to get these homes sold, and households behind you, want to know if their opportunity may come up. So, having a top spot's great, but it's not licensed to take as long as you want. You do have to meet deadlines along the way, and there will be a deadline for reserving the unit of your choice. Along with your reservation, you have to put down a $500 deposit. After you reserve a unit, the next step in the process would be to sign a purchase and sale agreement. Again, definitely have an attorney involved at that point if you don't already. Purchase and sale is the main agreement relative to buying the home and has a lot of important provisions in it. So you want to make sure that someone's looking through it on your behalf and advising you on any questions you may have, and making sure that your rights are your interests are protected. With the purchase and sale agreement, you'd put down 1.5% of the home price minus the $500 you already put down. And just so you know what that is, not that you can't do the math yourself, but that'd be $3,982. Okay, so if you are one of the households that gets to move forward in buying a home, put down your $500 with the reservation, and then you'd be looking at a little under $4,000 when you sign the purchase and sale agreement. Purchase and sale agreement will have a lot of provisions in it, but some of them will be, setting a closing date and a date by which to get your mortgage commitment. That's when you're going to want to immediately go back to the bank and turn your mortgage pre-approval into a commitment. You're going to want to. They can tell you what you'll need, and/or your lawyer can, but they're going to want to see the purchase and sale agreement. And the deed rider, if you haven't shown it to them already, will be appended to that purchase and sale agreement so they can see it. They're probably going to want to see a whole bunch of other documentation as well. And then finally, once you get your purchase and mortgage commitment, you'll have to do a final update with SEB just to make sure that your income and assets haven't gone way up and during the process. So you have to how do I say it? You have to be eligible at the time you apply to get into the lottery, but you have to maintain that eligibility throughout the process, right? So if you're eligible when you submit your application in October of 2020, where we are now, but then, in February or March of 2021, your income or assets has gone way up and put you over the limits, then unfortunately, that puts you over the limit and you would be ineligible. Hopefully that won't be the case, but please do keep that in mind. You have to be eligible when you apply, and you have to maintain that eligibility up through the closing. But the final review, that'll be done, about relatively, say a month or 6 weeks before the closing date. It's really more of an update of your file that you've already sort of taken the time to complete. And if you maintain if you remain eligible, that'll be that. And then after that, it would just be moving to your closing and move-in, and then you're done. No more, tests or reviews or anything like that. And once you're in the unit, there aren't any sort of ongoing certification requirements, or no one's looking to see what your income is in year 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or what your assets are doing. So, if you make more money down the road, that is fine. You can, I think these are going to be beautiful units, and so hopefully, people who are able to buy them through this process are going to love them exactly the way they are. If there are sort of large capital improvements that you want to make, you want to rip out the flooring and put in a special kind of wood that you love, that's something you can work out with the development team, but it's got to be done separately from the purchase and sale. And it's not something that you can expect to recoup the cost of later on down the road. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. And the reason for that is because these units need to stay affordable. And so if you're making investments in the property, hoping to, recoup the value of those later in time, the issue is that now you start making what was an affordable unit an unaffordable, just a market rate unit. And so you can, probably do those, but you're doing them on your own dime without necessarily getting to recoup that investment later in time. So that's kind of an overview. Were there any questions? Anything that I could elaborate on or clarify, or anything I didn't touch that you want to know about? I should say that our contact information is in the materials. If something comes up, you want to reach out to us, you certainly can. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. You can email us. You can call us. If you call us and we don't pick up, make sure to leave a message. And we'll get back to you, but certainly happy to help if anyone has any questions. It's a great opportunity. We want to make sure that households have the information that they need moving forward. So I'll just kind of wait a second here to see if anyone pops up with a question. But if not, thanks for tuning in, and hope this was informational, and that we see your application soon. No questions? All right. Well, have a great night, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and good luck moving forward. Good night.